So we get the pleasure of playing first, and this is in a tune hand, so we can't, as of now, play the Servant of the Conduit on turn 2, but I do like keeping the Sword of Hand. Um, we actually wouldn't mind being up against an aggressive deck because we've got so much removal, double Harness Lightning, and Kozilek's Return. The Tireless Tracker is the card, so there's the Hiss and Quagmire. So we're up against Black Green. The Tracker is the card that's going to give us that card advantage we may really need. So we drew a Vessel of Nascency, so solid turn for us. For our opponent, okay, so there's our opponent's matching our start essentially. And that's a pretty good draw. So rather than drawing a land, we drew a tune. So we're just going to immediately cast that and commit this Servant of the Conduit to the board here. And our opponent's in a spot where it could be Liliana. Okay, so it is going to be Liliana. And so we're going to have to think about how we want to try to tackle that card because it is pretty annoying to deal with, that's for sure. If we simply run out the tracker here, it's a little bit risky. Just because we don't have an immediate land to play, so we're not going to be getting any value off of it if our opponent just kills it. I like cracking the Vessel here. And so we're seeing a lot of good stuff, but the Aetherworks Marvel is what we want to take here. We've got 6 energy, so we're just going to pass the turn. And the plan now is revolving around hitting something like an Emrakul off the Aetherworks Marvel would be perfect. So here's a Ruinous Path going after our Servant of the Conduit, which is definitely annoying. But yep, we're just going to have to let that happen. And so now we just don't have the 4th land that we need in order to cast Aetherworks Marvel. But we drew the Evolving Wild, so that just means we're going to have to wait a turn to get our Marvel into play. We're going to get 2 clues here. So the clues aren't bad, and the tracker can potentially pressure Liliana. Here's a Mind Rack Demon, so we have the option of Harness Lightning that Mind Rack Demon away. Unclear if we actually want to do that, though. It may just be that we want to still activate the Marvel here. Our opponent has a Noxious Gearhulk in the graveyard now, so that -2 effect of the Liliana could be pretty good. We'll see if our opponent wants to, how our opponent wants to use the Lily, but it looks like just going to be an uptick here on the Tireless Tracker. So we do have some options here. If we get rid of the Mind Rack Demon, that would allow us to attack the Liliana, which is already at 6 loyalty. So that is somewhat appealing, but that would also mean we aren't able to activate the Aetherworks Marvel this turn. but we would be able to crack a clue. I kind of like that play. It's a little bit risky because we're not immediately activating Aetherworks Marvel, and if we just hit Emrakul, it's going to be really good. So just going to go for the Marvel. I think that's the play most players would make here. And all right, so we hit another Marvel, a Puzzle Knot, and we also hit a Chandra Flamecaller. Interesting. So didn't hit the Emrakul, which is what we really wanted to hit. If we get Chandra, we could use that to potentially pressure the Liliana. So let's go for the Chandra here. And we can uptick our Chandra. And the question is, how do we want to attack this turn? We can actually get in with our Tireless Tracker here if we want to. And I like doing that. So we can just simply attack Liliana with all of our creatures. And we'll see how our opponent elects to handle this spot. So if our opponent blocks an elemental, that means Liliana takes 4 and goes down to 2 loyalty. But it looks like the play is going to be blocking the tracker, but that's okay. We're going to get an energy, and the Liliana is now gone. And our opponent will have the option now of activating that Hiss and Quagmire if they want to, and attacking our Chandra. But we're okay with that exchange. We already have 3 clues, so the tracker has essentially done its job. And if our opponent does activate that Hiss and Quagmire, they're going to have to spend most of their mana in order to make that play. So, alright, there's the Hiss and Quagmire activation. So it looks like the Chandra is going down here. But this means we're going to get another energy. We've already got 3 clues, so we're actually very close to having another Marvel activation. And we have Ishkana, which we could just play and make spiders with. Our opponent is getting close to Emrakul here. Could potentially even have it next turn. So there's a traverse the Ulvenwald. I would expect that to find Emrakul, and that is what's going to be found with that traverse. So a few options here. We could Ishkana. We could activate Marvel this turn potentially by starting to crack clues, and I like that. Yeah, let's go for that. So crack a clue, get another energy. There's an Aether Hub, so that gets us an energy, so we can play that. Now we're up to 4 energy. And we could Harness Lightning away the Mind Rack Demon, so go Harness Lightning, Harness Lightning. That seems like not where we want to be, so just going to go ahead and crack these clues and activate the Marvel. And that's going to mean our hand is fully stocked here. So unfortunately, we did not find Emrakul once again. but Ishkana is just going to have to do at this point. So we're going to cast the Ishkana. Not the best since we have another one in our hand, but still pretty solid threat. It's going to hold down the fort and be able to block the Mind Rack Demon. Our opponent should be able to have access to Emrakul next turn. So that's going to mean we're going to want to make sure that our opponent can't do a ton on our turn, which is going to be difficult. We've got a lot of cards that we don't really want to be in our hand, like Harness Lightnings and Kozilek's Returns. If our opponent takes our turn, it's going to be possible to do a lot of damage with those cards. And so the Vessel of Nascency, that would be another card type that would be going to the graveyard, assuming our opponent cracks that. Now, we've been a little bit unlucky here to not hit Emrakul on our first two Marvel activations, but that can happen for sure. So we'll see what the play is. Our opponent's got now two cards in hand. It's actually going to be that's interesting. It's Murderous Gearhulk. So our opponent is going to now have options in terms of how they want to distribute these counters from the Gearhulk. And we don't even really mind losing these spiders. It looks like our opponent's going to make a 6/7 Mind Rack Demon. So that's a pretty sizable threat here. We cannot block it in a way that's going to get rid of it, unfortunately. Huh. We know that the Emrakul is coming, so we might as well just block with these spider tokens. Reason being is that they are going to die to the Kozilek's Return, basically regardless. And we will get some energy from them dying, so we're going to get 3 energy for Harness Lightning or for Aetherworks Marvel. And I actually don't mind an attack with the Ishkana here. Yeah, I like attacking with Ishkana. And this puts our opponent in a spot where, okay, so they are going to take it. That makes a lot of sense. And so now, from our perspective, we want to think about how to best situate this hand to be ready for an Emrakul coming down next turn. So I like playing out the Vessel and cracking that to see what we can find to get things going here. And that is going to put our energy count up to 4. And wow, so this is pretty unlucky. We found 2 copies of Emrakul. So that means there's only 1 copy left in our deck. So we're going to get an Emrakul into our hand, which is not really what we wanted. And so the question is now what to do. We have these Harness Lightnings, which we could use. So we could start using Harness Lightnings to try to get rid of our opponent's creatures. But the prospect of doing that isn't all that appealing. So we can play Game Trail, reveal a forest. I like just playing the Servant to get us up to 6 energy, activating the Aetherworks Marble, and going from there. So, not a great hit off of this activation. Vessel, eh. The Puzzle Knot gives us more energy. Chandra can be attacked pretty easily at this point, so I'm going to go for the Puzzle Knot here. And so that's going to put us up to 3 energy, so we can use the Harness Lightning to finish off the Gearhulk. So I'm gonna go for that play. Unfortunately, this Emrakul that our opponent's gonna play is gonna be very good. There wasn't too much we could do having not found Emrakul ourselves off of our Marvel activations. So this Vessel of Nascency is going to get sacrificed from our opponent. That's going to allow our opponent to Emrakul us, because it's going to be 6 card types. We know about the Emrakul already in our opponent's hand. And so when our opponent takes our turn, we basically have to assume that the Harness Lightning, the Kozilek's Return, and all of our creatures that are currently in play disappear. Those are the assumptions we have to make. So we're going to have to rely on the one Emrakul that we do still have in hand to clean up a lot of the damage that's going to be caused by what our opponent's going to do right now with their Emrakul. So we'll see. I mean, it's not looking great for us. Normally, this matchup is pretty good, but a lot of it hinges on Aetherworks Marvel. We weren't able to get it into play on turn 4. Once we did get the Marvel into play, finding Emrakuls off of our vessels, we found 3 Emrakuls, I believe, off of vessel activations, and we found 0 off of Aetherworks Marvel. So that's pretty unlikely to happen. So now we've got 2 of our Emrakuls gone. We don't have any way of returning them from our graveyard. And we've got 1 in hand, which we're going to be able to cast. Which is, it's nice that we're going to be able to cast this one, but we've only got 1 left in our deck, and our opponent has ways of recurring their Emrakuls. If we want to say trade off Emrakuls, our opponent's got Lilianas and Grapples to be able to get theirs back. So that's part of why this situation doesn't favor us, even though it's going to be one of those Emrakul versus Emrakul standoffs. Our opponent's going to be able to do a lot of damage to us here, get rid of our creatures. They can spend... They can basically do that however they want to. So one play our opponent could make would be to cast the Ishkana that is in our hand, make the spiders, and then Kozilek's Return away all of that stuff. But it looks like our opponent may want to activate the Aetherworks Marvel here. So maybe going for that approach to run us out of energy, which is also reasonable. So we're up to 5 energy now. Once some of our creatures die, that's going to mean we're at 6 energy, or our opponent can use the Harness Lightning just to basically fizzle it and get an energy to activate the Marvel. And the Kozilek's Return, because our opponent has 7 toughness or greater creatures, even the back half of it isn't going to do us much, and we don't have the second one in the graveyard here. So our opponent's making the correct attacks, and so what our opponent should do here, okay, so it looks like the Harness Lightning, our opponent just used up all of the energy, and now we're still going to have 2 energy left over, is what it's looking like. So we're going to get 1 there off the Ishkana dying, and then 1 here from the Servant dying. And then our opponent is going to probably cast the Kozilek's Return, maybe? We'll see. Looks like no. Okay. So we're able to untap. Draw step is Chandra. So we can actually make a pretty solid play of Kozilek's returning. We can play our land. So we've got 7 card types in our graveyard. We can go Kozilek's Return, play Emrakul, and then back half the Kozilek's Return to get rid of the demon. And then trade off Emrakuls. So that's one line we can take. Which seems reasonable. Alright, let's try that line. So gonna cast the Kozilek's Return and follow that up with the Promised End. That is Emrakul. And we're going to be able to get rid of that demon. We could have got rid of that demon by blocking with our Emrakul, but this gives us a lot more flexibility. So we see our opponent's got Grasp of Darkness, Mind Rack Demon, and Liliana. So Liliana in particular is a big problem because it gets back this Emrakul that our opponent has. So we could minus the Liliana right now if we wanted to. We can grasp away a Hissing Quagmire. The question is, do we actually want to trade off these Emrakuls knowing that our opponent has a Liliana in hand? And the answer is I'm not sure that we do want to trade them off. So I like activating a Quagmire here. And we can then just immediately Grasp of Darkness our opponent's own Hissing Quagmire. And we do want to cast the Liliana here. And we could plus on our opponent's own Emrakul. And then attack Emrakul into Emrakul. Our opponent could then minus Lily next turn, though, to get back the Emrakul. So I like just minusing Lily right now. And we're not going to return anything. So that's going to be it. We're just going to let our opponent have their turn now. So one of the issues here is that our opponent has a Noxious Gearhulk in the graveyard. But we have a Chandra Torch of Defiance in our hand. So what we can actually do here is we're gonna take this hit from the Emrakul. That's gonna bring us down to 13. We know that our opponent has a Mind Rack Demon to follow up. We can plus our Chandra. Well, it looks like our opponent just peeled another Liliana, so that's pretty good. So now our opponent's able to minus Lily right now. And it looks like the Gearhulk was returned. So yeah, our opponent returned the Gearhulk with Lily. And that's going to put us in a really tough spot. So with only one energy left. Okay, so we actually drew... we drew an Emrakul. That's going to make things interesting. So we're happy about having drawn this second Gearhulk here. So the question is, how do we want to play this? We could attack with our Emrakul if we wanted to. We basically have to attack with our Emrakul. So the question is, do we want to take out our opponent's Liliana here, or just go for our opponent's face? I think we want to get this Liliana off the battlefield, and then just follow up with Emrakul. So we're going to be able to take our opponent's turn here. Of course, we are going to want to keep in play the untapped Emrakul. And so we can use our opponent's Noxious Gearhulk to get rid of one of their own creatures, perhaps the Emrakul. And I think I like that. So we can cast the Noxious Gearhulk, get rid of our opponent's Emrakul. That's going to allow our opponent to gain 13. But we're actually now in a pretty good spot, assuming our opponent doesn't top deck something. So we've got a 13-13 in play. Our opponent can hit us for 7 here if they want to. So we're not going to block. We're not going to block the Hissing Quagmire, so that's going to put us all the way down to 6. But now we're able to untap and go Chandra plus Ishkana. So, yep, just going to go Chandra, shoot down the Gearhulk, and then play Ishkana. So, our opponent basically needs to peel something immediately, or else we have this game locked up. So there's a murder for Ishkana. That's pretty good. So that's going to mean we may not be able to kill our opponent next turn. And there's a grapple. Wow. So our opponent drew grapple and is now able to grapple back either Emrakul or Noxious Gearhulk. What a game this is. Alright, so there's the Gearhulk. That's going to come into play and get rid of our Emrakul. And so we have to think about trying to get to another Marvel activation here. Our opponent's back up to 30. So we can activate Aetherworks Marvel now. And we found another copy of Ishkana, so we can get that into play. And I like just passing here and trying to go for to drain our opponent out with Ishkana. Unfortunately, right now we don't have the energy to be able to do that, but we just drew a puzzle knot, so that's pretty good. So we could attack here, but I like just passing. There's a Pilgrim's Eye. So What we can do is we could cash this Chandra in to get rid of our opponent's Gear Hulk. But first, we're definitely going to want to, end of turn, drain our opponent. And I think we want to go ahead and probably go after the Gear Hulk. But first, we can sacrifice the Puzzle Knot and activate Marvel. So we want to start getting aggressive. So I like just attacking with everything besides the Ishkanah itself, because our opponent's going to presumably activate a Hissing Quagmire here to block. And then we're just going to go for a drain. So our opponent's down to 7 now, so we potentially have lethal next turn, actually. So yeah, I just like swinging with the team here. And we'll see. I don't think our opponent can get out of this, actually. So Grasp takes care of one of the spiders, but that's still not gonna do it. So we're gonna win that game. That was crazy. So did not think we were gonna win that game. It took the peeling the fourth Emrakul there, and grinding through our opponent's Emrakuls and multiple copies of Gear Hulk, and now we have to prepare ourselves for sideboarded games. So normally that's not how this matchup plays out, but we do want tireless trackers. We want some early removal, so we have to think about how we want to position our deck here. Because we're on the draw, Chandra Torch of Defiance is sometimes not quite as good as you want it to be. I like the Ulamog, the World Breaker, the Nissas. Bristling Hydra is another direction we can go. So when I board in the Hydras, I like to trim down on Puzzle Knot significantly. Our opponent's going to be boarding in discard, lots of discard, so we may not be able to get an Aetherworks Marvel going like we would want to, and that's why I'm fine with trimming an Emrakul. And we also don't really want Kozilek's returns. So this is a configuration I like quite a bit. Sometimes because we're on the draw, we can take Chandra out, but I'm gonna keep 2 in and leave the other one in the board. And then as far as the Chandra Flamecaller, I'm fine with boarding this out. So you can board in 1 Puzzle Knot and submit. So we want all of our Harness Lightnings, particularly because we are on the draw, so we need it for an answer to Grimflayer. I'm going to keep this. It's not the best hand, but it's basically 6 lands. But we have energy going for us. And that Servant means that we have the potential to get this Chandra out on turn 3. Which is always fun to be able to do that. And there's the Grimflayer that we were kind of worried about. So if our opponent just simply attacks with Grimflayer, we do have a decision to make if we want to block or not. Or our opponent may just play a removal spell first, who knows. So here's Traverse, that's going to find a Forest. So it looks like our opponent may just attack here. I think we want to take it. Reason being is we can play Chandra next turn. And then also, if we block, our opponent could sacrifice the Vessel and potentially hit Delirium right away. Now, if our opponent has a second copy of Grimflayer, that's going to be incredibly bad for us. Alright, that's also bad for us. Transgress the Mind. That's going to take our Chandra. And we're left with not a whole lot going on. So I'm going to keep the Evolving Wilds in case we draw a Tireless Tracker and want to get some clues. So our opponent's going to sacrifice the Vessel of Nascency. It looks like they found a Tireless Tracker off of it. And Delirium is now on, so we're forced to take this hit. And Grimflayer is now a 4/4. We're still in it. We have live draws. Like if we draw Chandra, if we draw Planeswalk, we just need one of our big threats. Unfortunately, Evolving Wilds is the opposite of that. So this is a little bit of an unusual draw. Doesn't normally happen that you flood out this badly with the Marvel deck. And our opponent's actually pretty close to Emrakul even at this point. 6 card types in the graveyard, 5 lands in play. Could be an Ishkana coming down this turn. Yep, Ishkana is going to be the play. And all right, that's enough. That's enough of that. So time for game 3. I like boarding in another Chandra because we're on the play. So we don't really super need all of these puzzle knots. We saw that game we had a lot of energy. Harness Lightning is another way we can get energy, but we can also use it as a removal spell. So I like this. I like this configuration. And this is a keep. Attune into Lightning for Grimflayer into Tireless Tracker is solid. And we drew another Attune, but I actually like just holding on to it here. Because if our opponent plays a Grimflayer, we want to be able to kill it right away. But our opponent didn't play a Grimflayer. So I think I still like playing out this Tireless Tracker now that we drew Chandra. Because we want to play Chandra next turn. And so if our opponent uses a removal spell and gets rid of the tracker, that's going to mean that our opponent, and we see a Lost Legacy get milled here and a Transgress. So we know that our opponent is on a lot of discard. If our opponent uses a removal spell to get rid of the tracker, then they're not playing a discard spell or a Liliana here. And it's pretty good turn for us from our perspective. Our opponent didn't do a ton there. And we drew an Aetherworks Marvel. So I actually like playing Chandra, and we can make the mana, and then use that mana to pop the clue, which is a pretty nice little combo there. And once we okay, so there's a Mind Rack Demon, solid for our opponent, but we drew a Nissa Vital Force. So I like casting this Attune here, getting a Forest, getting that into play. So that's going to get us a clue, and we can put our Marvel down, and we can just activate it this turn if we want to. So I think that the better play is going to be to use the Harness Lightning just to kill off the Mind Rack Demon, though. And our opponent has to be thinking that Chandra keeps going up, and we're closer and closer to being able to ultimate it. Alright, so here's Ishkana. That's a pretty solid play. And our draw, Vessel of Nascency. Interesting. So, got a few options that we can go with here. I like getting the Vessel into play. And making mana with Chandra. And so now we can just set up some good blocks for us this turn. We don't necessarily need to be attacking, because Chandra's on 7. Our opponent has to respect that. And Nissa's also on 6, so we're threatening 2 different ultimates here. And we Marvel after board, we don't get that energy normally immediately. It's more of just a way of grinding out energy, sacrificing clues, sacrificing vessels, having creatures trade in combat, having cards being exchanged. So it's not quite as good as it would be game 1 after board, but it's still a very, very powerful card. So here's a Verdurous Gearhulk. So that is going to change up the math here for sure. So we'll see how our opponent wants to play this. They can pressure one of our Planeswalkers. It's going to be hard to get both off the table, though. So it looks like the Ishkana is going to get buffed up, which makes some sense here. And just past the turn, that's very aggressive, knowing that we can just ultimate Chandra here if we want to. So we're definitely gonna just go for the ultimate of Chandra. And so we're at 4 energy right now. So I like cracking this clue, or actually we can crack the vessel. So that's gonna put us up to 5 energy. get a land. So now we can go Tireless Tracker. That's going to deal our opponent 5 damage with the Chandra. Then we get a clue. We can sack a clue to go up to 5 energy here. So activate this. Say we want to get a Harness Lightning. And just go for a Harness Lightning on a Spider. Now our opponent's going to take 5. We can kill off the Spider if we want to. And we can actually just kill our opponent this turn by untapping a Forest, using it for mana, playing Vessel, and dealing our opponent that additional 5. So that's going to do it.